are going to hear this morning from Reverend Gregory Kehn. Reverend Kehn is a fourth-generation spiritualist medium. As early as age 5, and under the guidance and techniques from his grandmother, a Cherokee Native American, and his mother, who were both mediums, he provided messages of healing to those around him. As a student of internationally known trance medium Dana Bailey, he officially started giving messages at Inspirational Stump at age 8. Greg is currently a registered medium in Lilydale for over 48 years and continues to be a guest on TV and radio programs. Greg continues his lifelong dedication to spirit and healing community by teaching workshops and spiritual development classes online and in classrooms around the world, which we will have the pleasure this afternoon of hearing from him. But right now, let me introduce to you Reverend Gregory Kehn.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me all right? Good. No? A little louder. Alrighty. Am I loud enough now?
We're working.
We'll get there.
Take that one out.
Alright.
I'll try that.
Alrighty. That's working. Good, thank you. Well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Wonderful to be here. It's a beautiful weather out. We left up north to come down, and when we come down, the next day they had 10 inches of snow, and the next day they had 10 more, so I was very blessed with the idea that we got here without having any problem at all. So it worked out wonderfully. Well, wonderful to see all the faces here. You know, I was thinking about the healing as you were working with healing, and as you were working with spirit. I find that my grandmother and mother both worked with healing and spirit and worked with it all their lives. And it was something that as a child, my grandmother always said to me, no matter what's going on, no matter how negative someone can be or act or speak, we need to send them love and healing. And I look at the world right now and I see all the turmoil that's going on in the world and the turmoil that's occurring within people and their individuals. And I look at that around me and I think, you know, when I was very young, I was very frustrated with the idea of looking at the world and how people acted and what they went through and the attitudes and energies they carried. And I was so sensitive that I didn't like being around the crowds. I didn't like being around the whole big groups of people because being around that really bothered me because I'd pick up on all these energies. And as life went on, I learned to bring balance to that. My grandmother and mother helped me with that, and Dana Bailey helped me with that, to reach a point of having harmony within our own space. And we can send healing to everyone. We can send the energy out to everyone. We can send it out to the world. I enjoyed the healing service with the prayer and thought about sending it to the world and giving it to everyone, because it's something that I believe that we as believers in what we believe in spiritualism and healing, I find that that's so important, that we're needing to look at our lives and realize these are real basic things I was taught as a child, that it's like, don't ridicule, don't condemn, don't misjudge, you know, and looking at the world around us and see all the turmoil going on. You know, you look at the whole planet and you look at all the different countries and states and cities and towns and just all the stuff that's going on around us. And to look at us here and say, okay, we can really be the root of harmony and the root of calmness and bring healing and bring balance to everyone. And we really have more power in manifesting that energy than what at times I find people believing. A lot of people have a hard time believing that we as an individual can make some changes and make changes for the world around us. You know, my grandmother always taught me that we look at life and we look at things around us going on with people, we can be in harmony and we can have chaos next to us. But we can also send out that thought and prayer of healing for that chaos to bring harmony and calmness to them also, no matter what the circumstance may be. You know, when I was 11 years old, I had an experience of dying 3 times in a week. I went through the tunnel of light, and I experienced being on the spirit side. And I refer to it now as taking 3 times to convince me to come back. Because once I was over there, it was like everything was wonderful and a beautiful energy, and the colors were just phenomenal. And looking at the tunnel the first time I went over, my first thought was, I'm really over here, and this is it. I'm going to stay. And as that experience occurred, and I come through the tunnel, and I was standing there by a river, as I was looking at the river, I started to hear my grandmother say to me, Gregory, come here. And as she started to project that to me, she was on the other side of the river. And I didn't have a lot of understanding of it at the moment, but I had this trust that said, you can walk across to her. And I remember walking in that state. I walked across the water to her, and a small part of my mind was going, you're walking on water. And then there was this other big part of me going, but yet I know it's really all right. And that's a real, true test of trust. You're trusting. And how many of us get caught up in the physical world and allow ourselves to step back from trusting what we really feel, how we really feel, what we're really feeling within us. And it's something I find a huge difference between what we consciously sometimes perceive and think to what we really feel. And feel meaning what Spirit's giving us, what they're guiding us in, what the energy would be that would be so powerful that would be the answer. You know, I many times have said to people, that experience to me was what changed my life in a sense of belief and direction. Because when I looked at that, I thought, okay, my mother believed what she believed, my grandmother believed what she believed, I was raised in it. But it was also an energy, too, of learning to allow yourself inwardly to have that trust no matter what's going on around you, that Spirit's with you, you're never alone. I remember crossing that water and giving my grandmother a hug, and she said to me, I have someone for you to meet. And I met Jesus at that point, and he came to me and stood there and talked with me. And I kept seeing, you know, on the news, you see this little note at the bottom, and it just keeps going through. Well, this was pictures. And I kept seeing all these pictures of events in the world and what was going to be happening, what was coming. I didn't realize at that time that it was what was coming. But later I realized that here's the events in life, and they're still happening, that I've witnessed them occurring. And some of them weren't so nice, and some of them were wonderful events. But like the first shuttle explosion, I had seen that when I was 11, and I was standing in my home, and a friend of mine said to me, well, you should see what's on the news. I said it exploded. And I had been reading in my reading room, and I come out with a client, and I said it exploded. And we had sent out the thoughts and prayers previous to that in a circle, that sending out those prayers for the people that would be involved, not only in the shuttle itself, but the idea of everyone involved in that. And I felt it was a real awakening for people to wake up. And it was really a fusing of energy, of drawing people together in a supportive, healing, loving manner. And we're needing to look at that world energy and not look at just ourselves and where we're at in our own little world, our own little existence, and realize that's such a big change for us to look at the world now. You know, some of us reach a point where we hear things on the news and we see things around us and we start to push it away. I want to say, let's not spend the energy on pushing it away. Let's spend the energy on sending the healing. Because I believe the healing energy can make changes. I've seen changes in people. You know, I've seen some people that you would term somewhat negative in their attitudes, and I've watched them shift and change to a very positive level. I want to say it this way: you don't give up on anyone. You know, Jesus was expressing to me that my purpose in life was to be here to help people. My pathway in life was to counsel people. And I remember when I was 8, my father saying to me, he said, what do you want to do when you grow up? You know, what kind of work do you want to do? And I said, I want to work in the healing temple at Lloydale, and I want to read for people. And it's something that I felt at that age was very strong. Now, I think it shocked my father. He didn't know what to do with that. He just sort of walked away thinking, you know, he had been a mill worker and a farmer and a home builder and all these things he would do in a tangible world. and he was a very tangible man, handling everything. And when I had the experience in 11, he thought for sure that he was losing me. And he thought for certain that, the son is going to pass. And my mother said to him, no, he's going to be here. This is his experience. This is for him. This is a healing for him. Well, I know my father didn't understand that. I know it was an energy that he thought in his conscious level thinking was the idea of loss and harm, negativity. And I look at that now and realize the 3 times I had that happen, it was such an experience for me to see relatives on the other side of life that all died before I had passed, before my birth actually. And to look at the energy around that and realize how close we really are. I think it's a shame when I'm at a hospital or I'm at a funeral home or, people are missing someone so badly. And I see that kind of energy going on with them and I think, why don't they believe what we believe? Why don't they believe what we know and what we recognize as Spirit helping us, guiding us, with us all the time? And it's something I find fascinating that there's so many people in the world now, whether you term it different religions or belief systems, whatever you want to call it. It's like I look at that because I remember the time when my mother passed away. She died at 4:10. At 5:12, she was standing at the end of my bed. And she came through me that quickly and expressed to me that she was fine. Also, I almost didn't recognize her at first because the condition she was in when she passed, she had cancer 8.5 years. And when I look at that and I think how bad she looked in the physical world, and then to look at the idea that within an hour and a few minutes, here she is appearing to me looking like she looked when I was 15 years old. And beautiful, all her hair, wonderful lady, beautiful health, everything in order. My grandmother stepped in also and said, she's with me, we're fine. And I look at that and think how comforting that is and how peaceful that is for me. And I look at the world around us and some of the belief systems people live in and some of the turmoil people live in. I think it's very sad. And it's such a sad energy to look at that belief system that sometimes people get into what I would term almost a fearful level, and they live in that fear. How many of us here have been a spiritualist most of our lives? And how many of us here were born into it? If you look at that energy and you realize that this message is something that we're generationally sharing with the world around us. I had a gentleman that studied the history of spiritualism quite a bit, and he said to me, spiritualism was the largest religion during World War II, was the largest religion and the most recognized in the whole United States. And I look at that and I want to say, when people were in need, where did they go? Where did they go for guidance, for messages, for the connection to Spirit, the connection to their loved ones that passed away? And we look at all that energy going on and how powerful that was. And I wasn't living in that time in the body, but I look at that and I think to myself, how many people reached out? And how many people are now reaching out? It may not be one conflict in the world or a world war the way we looked at it in World War II, but looking at the world around us and all the conflicts that are going on, let's have that thought of that prayer and that energy that we're needing to put forth to bring change, bring healing, bring the harmony that we're really needing to have. And we're needing to look at that as something that we sometimes really don't think about that. I had a gentleman say to me one time, why do you think you can change the world? And I said, because I know it happens. I know it can be done. And I said, I've watched changes in people and working with them, or say, for example, reading for them. I had a lady one time get up and walk out of the reading room and she left her cane. And I said to her as she left the cane, she was on the porch, and I walked out with a cane and I said, do you need this? And she looked at me and she goes, oh my God, I forgot all about it. And if you look at the energy of what healing can occur, I wasn't sitting there doing laying on of hands. I was just working with Spirit. and allowing yourself to work with spirit in whatever form you now understand or believe in, or open yourself to take time to let that occur. You know, I look at many things at times and we try to do it forcefully. We try to push things to happen. And if we do it in a forceful, pushful manner, we're not really allowing the energy to support it. And if we do it in a manner where we're putting forth the opportunity, we're putting forth the intent. And as we set that intent, we're going to bring healing and we're going to bring harmony. If we're thinking of the best and we're putting the best energy into it, what else can happen? You know, it isn't the idea of demanding, it's the idea of being in harmony with. And I find some people, I've had them in class at times, and they'd say to me, well, I prayed really hard for this, you know, and I worked on it really hard, and it didn't happen. And I said, it wasn't supposed to. When it's supposed to happen, it will happen. If we put out the thought and we put a serial number on it, and this is the color we want, and this is how we want it, you know, God's always given us something better than we're even wanting or we even projecting. And if we were to look at that energy and realize how forceful we really are, you know, I've heard some people pray out loud at times, and I just find it amazing, the demandingness and the control we want to influence on things and people and healing. You know, I always found that fascinating. As a little child, I remember sitting in a church one time, and it wasn't a spiritualist church, and my mother said to me, she said, don't ask questions now. And I'm sitting there, and I was just a little kid, I couldn't even reach the floor. And I said to her, I said, why is everybody afraid of God? Why is everybody afraid of Jesus? You know, why is this fear energy here? And they're all holding candles and doing the Christmas prayers. And it's like, wow, what I'm feeling versus what is being projected and being talked about. And I looked at that and I thought to myself, how much trust do we need to have in ourselves to allow ourselves to trust Spirit, to allow ourselves to let Spirit come through in a manner that's going to bring the balance and the harmony that we really are capable of. We're all creators. We all can manifest. You know, I saw a book one time and it talked about manifesting. And I looked at the way the person was projecting it, and I thought to myself, it's like there was such a forceful energy of projection that I look at it as, if we try to narrow it down to one singular thing and we're trying to be so forceful with it, we're not leaving any room for God to help us in choices or guidance. And I find that many people do that. They get so forceful and so precise with how they want something to be. I've always sent out the thought that this is what I would desire, and I leave the door open. I don't close the door, I don't narrow the doorway, I leave it very open. You know, I had my mother and my grandmother both shared this with me many times. You know, we'd go to someone that was ill, that really, they would say, send healing. And I heard different people sending healing, and they were sending healing in a forceful manner of keeping the person here. And I look at it as, grandmother always said to me, you know, healing happens here or hereafter. And sometimes the hereafter is where the healing really occurs. And to not look at it as something that we're trying to force and trying to demand of what we want and how we want Spirit to take care of it. I find when we're demanding, you know, I would get annoyed with that if somebody was demanding of me. And I look at the idea of that being something we all do to some extent. You know, I look at the healing energy, and I remember working with my mother, and I worked with healing with her before she passed away. And she said to me about a year ahead of time, we were sitting at the breakfast table at her home, and she said, I'm going to be passing this month next year. I'll be leaving. And she said, I'm not telling your sister and your father. I'm not going to let them know. They really can't handle it. You understand it, and it's okay. And she passed that month the next year. And it was interesting because everyone then functioned normally and shared normally and was not under that stress and strain of feeling like I'm losing someone. And I recognized that in my heart center as not losing someone. I knew she would no longer be in pain. She'd no longer be suffering. There'd be no longer the turmoil and the problems that she had. And I look at the energy around us and realize how many times we're so demanding of trying to force healing to be what we want it to be. And we're needing to look at the healing energy in that loving manner and what's supposed to be will be, and allow that peacefulness to occur. And as we let the peacefulness occur, we're then having the harmony and the healing. You know, I have a gentleman that passed over that he said to me one time, I grew up with him, David Carpenter, and he was spiritually a very open person, understood and studied a lot of different religions. He was a person that said to me, he says, you keep things simple. He says, your belief system, he says, your understanding, he says, it's kept very simple. And I said, well, that to me is where we're needing to be, and let God take care of it. And not look at it as something we're trying to forcefully do all on our own. And we're needing to really realize we're working with God, and we're not in the seat above God. God's above us. We're needing to allow ourselves to go with that flow, and that's going to bring us the peace and the harmony that we really want. You know, I remember working in the Healing Temple in Lilydale, and I remember a lady one time there, Thelma Carmen was running the Healing Temple at that time. This is when I was a little kid. And Thelma worked on a gentleman, and he left, and he came back, and he walked back in, and he said to her, he said, I don't understand this. He says, I'm really worried. He says, will the pain stay gone? And it was so interesting in my mind as a child that it's like, look at the belief system that we get into, that we hang on to things that we're not needing, that we would call pain, we'd call suffering in some manner, but we hang on to them. And to recognize letting go of them, we're not used to having the harmony, and we're needing to allow ourselves to have the harmony and be at peace with the harmony and know that we're worthy of it. You know, I had a gentleman tell me one time, Dana Bailey, he had been to this camp many times years and years ago, and been in Lilydale and Chesterfield and different places. He was an interesting man. And he said to me one time, he said, he said, it isn't that we can't be healed, we have to choose to allow it. And in what level are we learning and growing with the lessons we're here in the body? We're here to learn, we're here to grow, we're here to progress. And it's something that we're needing to allow ourselves to fully function in that, and not allow ourselves to resist or hold back from it. You know, I had a gentleman bring in a little girl one time, and he said, we drove from Cleveland, and he said, well, my wife and I were talking about a reading, and the little girl in the back seat said, I want a reading too. And I look at the energy around that, and this is a 3-year-old wanted a reading. And the father carried the child into the reading room with him, and he said, I don't know what to do. He says, I'll pay you double. He says, you got to do a reading for this kid. He said, she wouldn't shut up all the way from Cleveland. And I said, okay. I says, just have her sit in your lap. And I said, we'll do a reading. And I did a tape for her and did a prayer and did the reading. And during the reading, she said to me, she goes, you're not wearing your big robe anymore. And I said, no. I said, that was another time. And she said, and you're not in that big stone building. I said, no, that was another time. And I said, and you came and helped me in the garden. And she says, yeah. She says, we used to feed everybody. And I said, I know that you know me. And she said, I know you, but she says, you're not dressed the way you used to. And the father's sitting there not understanding what's going on. And he's looking at me, and he's looking at this kid, and he finally picked her up and turned her towards him and looked at him like, who is this? So to me, I look at that and I think how open that 3-year-old was, and how truly open. I mean, at all levels open. And it was amazing to share with her. And when she got down from his lap and I had handed her the tape, she did this and bowed and said to me, "Thank you. I want to come and see you again." That young lady I've read at the ages of 17 and above now. And it made a difference in her life to understand that someone not only accepted her understanding and awareness, but was there for her in a supportive, sharing manner. And how many of us have contact with either our children, our grandchildren, great-grandchildren, the connections we're having with children, that we can share that. And I look at her now, and she brought up a comment to me one time, and she said, now this is when she's probably in her 20s, mid-20s. She said to me, I love the idea that my parents brought me here. And I understood that because when I went to school and I went to college and I went to all these things, she said, there's a lot of people out there that have no clue and no understanding. And she said, it was beautiful to know what I know, and I could share it with others. In closing, I'd like to say, can we share this belief system and the healing and that love and our trust in ourselves and spirit, and allow that to manifest in a way that would bring peace and harmony, not only to our own lives, but to the world around us. And not just here in this environment, but I mean in the world around us. Please take a moment every day to put out that thought and prayer and send that healing. Thank you so much. God bless you.